All right, and everyone can see my screen. All right, perfect. All right, so our water level monitoring program um, was a little bit of background on this. It came up around 2021, 2022, when we were experiencing some pretty intense kind of drought levels or drought experiences in the Charles River Watershed. And we were kind of noticing that throughout many of our kind of tributaries, so the rivers and streams that kind of flow into the Charles River. And we have a lot less knowledge of kind of those water levels. Our other program, our volunteer monthly monitoring program, we get depth data from that. So the main stem of the Charles, we have a pretty good idea of kind of what the water levels are looking like throughout the year for that. But this program was kind of brought on as something to kind of look out for those things and just keep track of those kind of more at-risk tributaries that we were seeing changes in, especially during more drought-heavy seasons. And that's kind of what your role is going to be, is helping us in that process. Very brief Charles River background for anyone who might be new or seeing this, like I said, on the recording later. At CRWA, our mission is to protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and its watershed, and we do that through science, advocacy, and law. So that comes in a variety of different forms. We've got 5 main program areas. We've got our river science team, which is what our water level monitoring comes under. Our river restoration, which is focused on restoring the river to a more natural state or a less debilitated or less degraded state where we can. And then we also have our stormwater, excuse me, we have our stormwater department, which is focused on stormwater pollution, which is kind of our main pollutant source that we're seeing going into the Charles River, which can raise E. coli levels or nutrient levels and brings all other sorts of things into the river. We also have our advocacy team, who focuses mainly on our kind of legislative and municipal work. So bringing the science work that we do to that state and local level to affect change through the law. We have our climate resiliency team, which this falls a little bit underneath that of just kind of seeing, climate change. We're seeing more drought-like conditions. We're also seeing larger precipitation events throughout the year. So getting an idea of kind of what that's at. A lot of our municipalities are experiencing flooding these days. And then we have our education outreach team, which is kind of something everyone at CRWA kind of takes part in. So that could be things like class visits, doing talks, or just at events and things, teaching people about the work that we do. This is a little bit of kind of what I was saying already, but it is volunteers making assessments for water level using either, measuring like meter sticks, or I'll go over kind of the process that we use. If we can provide you like a weighted rope, and you put clothespins on it and measure the distance between those, which will give you your water level. It's a very low tech solution for that for folks. And the big part of this data, like I said, because it was kind of birthed through drought uh, management and drought understanding, we often send this data to the state's drought management task force to help them determine in their determinations for kind of those state level drought conditions. So this is really, really important data for them to know kind of at a more local level, kind of where we need to make a higher or lower drought determination. So we can, our municipalities can make informed decisions and, make sure people are not using too much water during those conditions. Uh, I've got ahead of myself a little bit on my slides today too. But like I said, mainly we are looking to use this data to advocate for better statewide drought management as well on kind of that advocacy level. Right now, it's often very municipal focused, town by town. And so one of the things we would like to see is things shift towards more regional focuses on how to manage water, because, one town's access to water can also affect another town's access to water as well. And so we think that, it should be a little bit more cohesive in that realm. especially with things like water bans or water, any kind of water restrictions. It's a little bit easier if a collective effort is being put into that. So where are we actually looking at? So we have 7 tributaries in the Charles River that we a few years ago had identified as our kind of higher risk ones. And so those are going to be our main focus for this program. They are mainly focused in our upper watershed, which actually let me, oh, I don't have the map right there. Upper watershed is kind of a little weird. It means it's more upriver. So if you're looking at a map, the Charles River starts in like the Hopkinton area, which is like south of Boston, but that is the upper watershed. It can get a little confusing, takes a minute to get used to, but that's where the majority of them are focused in. We do have ones a little bit more north, like Stony Brook and Lincoln is kind of our more northern one that we are looking at as well. And then a little more westerly with kind of like the Natick area as well for our sites. This program is very on your own time and when you're able. There's not like a strict a very strict schedule with when we're asking for folks to kind of take their observations. So we aren't like, okay, you need to go out, every Wednesday and take a reading or anything like that. The idea is that it can be built into your personal schedule as much as possible. Or, when you have the time to go out, you can go out and take, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on, how far you live from the sites, and take an observation. Ideally, we would like at least one observation per week, but that's obviously not always possible. But the more data for us, the more helpful it can be for kind of the folks that we're sending the data out to, essentially. So our main streams right now that we're looking at is Bogastow Brook, which is in Millis, Davis Brook in Natick, Eagle Brook in Norfolk, Godfrey Brook in Milford, Hopping Brook in Holliston, Stony Brook in Lincoln, and then Vine Brook in Medfield. Historically, we've only ever had, I think, 3 to 4 of those ever get monitored on a semi-regular basis throughout the summer months. So we would be looking to get all of those done, but obviously I'm not expecting people to drive over an hour to go visit a site. It is the ones that are most convenient to you to go to. And just as a quick look here at kind of the distribution of these sites here on this kind of map that I have, and I will share this map around as well with folks just so you can look at them. This is kind of our distribution for the rivers. So this is mainly our upper watershed area. Natick kind of gets into that like middle watershed zone for us. And then Lincoln at LAN 12 is our kind of most northern one here that will be looking to have people monitor. Like I said, I will share this around with folks as well to so you can, plot out the exact things. These coordinate plots are kind of the exact area we are looking for folks to monitor. They've been kind of selected as either the easiest place to sample or wade or those types of things. For a majority of these sites, you are able to either do it off of a bridge or kind of a overpassing or road crossing, where you can, if we set you up with the weighted rope, you can lower that down. You lower the weight to the bottom of the river or the stream, put a clothespin there, and then you raise the weight up until you reach the kind of very surface of the water, put another clothespin there, and then you'll just use a tape measure to measure the distance between those. That is kind of the simplest way to do it. Some of the sites we are able to have folks, if they're able to, and they have like tall enough like rain boots, or if they have their own pair of personal waders, they are shallow enough where you can wade in with like a meter stick and just kind of stick that in and take your kind of reading. Ideally, from week to week, you're getting from the center of the stream. That way you're kind of getting the deepest portion, and you want to aim for kind of the same similar area every time, just so you're getting a consistent kind of data. Um, the way that we collect our survey data is through a program called Survey 123. It's part of the like ArcGIS system of apps and things. It's very simple. It's you filling out a form. If anyone would like to start filling out, if you're not familiar with Survey 123, like I said, I'll send these slides to everyone so that they can download the app as well or get started on that. And that login information will work. You should only have to log in, I think, the first time if you've never used it before or downloaded the survey. Most folks, you log in once and then it's kind of saved in there for you. But it's going to ask some pretty simple questions. It's going to ask for your volunteer name. That's just like your first name and first initial. You don't have to put your whole name in there, just enough for us to kind of know who you are. So we can, if we see an anomaly in the data, we're able to just kind of reach out and be like, hey, we noticed, maybe you meant to put like 16 inches for your depth, but you wrote 116 inches and that looked a little weird. And I might ask you if that's what you meant to type in. It happens with this type of stuff all the time. It's very normal. It's going to ask you about your monitor experience. So if you've been trained or untrained, this would count as your training for that. So you can always just click trained. And then it'll ask for your affiliation. This is kind of part of, sometimes we have people from local boathouses that'll be doing it. The option that will kind of fit best for most people is going to just be volunteer. And then it's also going to ask you for your date and time of observation, which is when you took the actual reading. And you just want to double check that those are accurate to when you took the reading. So the one thing to remember with Survey 123 is when you open the survey, it's going to auto fill in that time of when you opened the thing to fill in. That might not necessarily be the time that you took the readings. So because some folks will take the reading, write it down in a notebook, and then wait till they get home to do it. And so you'll just want to adjust that time to when the actual reading is taken. It's then going to ask you what site you were at. And that, like I said, will come from that map site. All the options are available in there. And then it's also going to have the location. That's just the other thing to look for if you are filling out the survey, not where you're taking the reading. You're just going to want to do your best to move it close to where you actually did. And like I said, that map that I showed you that I'll be sharing will also have those exact coordinates or address location that you can put into the survey as well if you are someone who does it kind of at a different time. Also, it's going to ask you for your measurement. So we do take our depth measurements in inches, so you don't have to worry about like converting to centimeters or meters or anything like that. You can do it your depth in inches. If you put it in, actually, I think it's, yeah, just depth in inches. You don't have to put like 3 feet. So whatever the reading is in inches is good. If it's, like I said, if it's easily weightable, you can just use a measuring tape or a meter stick if you have one. And if the best access is from the stream, you can use the weighted rope method. If you don't have any of this equipment, that is fine. You can let me know and we're able to provide equipment so I can get you the rope, and it'll likely be the rope and weight method, which can still work in a weighting situation as well. It's the same process. You're just not doing it from above a bridge. So those are kind of the main things to keep in mind there. Happy to provide equipment. The only thing that I don't think we would necessarily always be able to provide would be like waders or anything like that, because we have a pretty limited amount of those. And the other thing we're going to ask for from folks is just to take a site photo. So that'll just help us put some reference on where you actually sampled, and kind of aiming for like a landscape shot, getting as much as you can in the photo. It's just very helpful. It also can help me lightly gauge if like something looks a little off with any kind of like mistypings that might have gone in with the depth thing. If the stream bed is completely dry and I see that you put like 20 inches of water, I might be like, hey, something might have happened here. And if you can, we ask that you try to take the photos from like kind of the same spot and angle every time, what also just for consistency's sake across the board for the data. And then these are just some interesting photos from the last these are all from 2022 when we were kind of noticing a lot of the drought things. So you've got Bogastow Brook here on the left and Davis Brook on the right, which you can see Davis Brook completely dried up and Bogastow Brook was quite reduced in its volume of water here. I know it's a little hard to tell. We don't always have before photos for these types of things, but especially for the Davis Brook one, there should be water there, and there was none. So that's we are seeing these types of concerns in very drought heavy years. We're also on a personal level concerned about drought this year. I mean, it's been rainy almost every weekend the last month, but we've just basically got out of like a 9 or 8 month drought back in I think it was like September to March or even maybe April. So the drought, we were kind of in a drought all winter. So we finally kind of got out of that. So we're just unsure where the summer is going to go. So we want to keep an eye on these things. Some more, like I said, we don't always have the before photos, but some of these are a little bit lower than they normally would be. Pine Brook in particular here. Eagle Brook actually looks kind of fine in this photo, which is good to see. You know, there's a good amount of water in there. And like I said, so the only equipment that you'll need for this is a phone or a computer to fill out the survey. And then if you have your own meter stick, that's great. That works for us. If you don't have that kind of equipment, I can provide kind of a rope with a weight on it and the clothespins that you would need to take the measure, as well as tape measures as well if you don't have one at home. And then if you are someone who hasn't volunteered with CRWA before, we just have a volunteer waiver that we ask you to sign before going out. And you'll have to do that once. It is kind of a one and done situation. You have to do it every single time you go out. Actually, and this year, normally in the past, I have kind of assigned folks to a site, and that's kind of been their site. I'm attempting a looser structure this year in that I'm providing everyone all the site information so they can make decisions on what sites and how many of those sites they want to take on for monitoring. And you're welcome to just pick one site, and that is kind of the one. And you don't really have to worry about if someone else has already monitored that site. Any kind of repeat data is going to be good data for us. So even if someone took a depth measurement yesterday at the site you're going to today, that's still good to know. More data is always going to keep us at kind of a more accurate understanding of the water levels for these places. And so that is kind of, like I said, it was going to be a very brief call. It's a very simple program on kind of the outside. I'm going to leave it open now. If anyone has specific questions that they have for me, I can answer those. As far as kind of next steps are going to go, tomorrow I will follow up with folks with kind of that site map. I'm going to ask you kind of which sites from those you think you're interested in, and then kind of what your equipment needs are. I will ask probably as well for just like a rough idea for how often you think you will be able to go out, just so I have an idea. But like I said, if you tell me I can go 3 times a week and it only ends up becoming once a week or once every other week, like that's fine. Like no need to stress too much about that. I just like to have an idea of kind of how much data to expect, so I can kind of schedule in like looking at it essentially like that. I think Lisa put in the chat, is monitoring year round. We have extended the program on occasion to go further past the summer. It's kind of been a little bit dependent on where we're at with drought determination. So this past year, because we were just in a long drought, Damon's been doing some occasional depth readings throughout kind of even a little bit into the winter when the streams weren't frozen over and things like that. So it does vary a little bit year to year depending on where our water levels are at. So intended to be mostly a summer program, but if there's heavy drought conditions, we ask if folks can stay on. It's ideal. So we get to continue to provide that data to the drought management team. If no one else, if anyone has any other questions, now's your time. If something comes up later that you have a question about, feel free to just email me. Happy to answer. Like I said, I'll have more follow-up information and some more kind of structured up stuff for everyone to follow up with and see.
Ryan, one thing I might point out to people is that the distance from the bridge to the bottom hardly ever changes. So if you get the mark on your rope once, that can serve you at times where when the water is running too fast to be able to drop the sinker to the bottom. So if the water is running too fast and you already know what the mark is between the bridge and the bottom, you can just measure from the bridge to the surface of the water and measure between your mark and that to get the depth. Because if the water is running too fast, it'll sweep the sinker away.
Yeah, that's actually, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really good idea. Yeah, so it might be a good idea to like either take a piece of tape or like Sharpie to that section of the rope if you're doing the weighted method, just so like Damon said, if it does suck when it's going too fast and it just sweeps the little 3 pound, 4 pound weight out of the way, makes your measurement not as accurate. So yeah, that is a great piece of advice to try and find a way to mark the rope consistently so that you can just do it that way. All right, great. Well, if no one has any other questions, I will stop the recording.